I think it's challenging, but I really love those projects because the bones of the existing building really informs your new work. And it's a really beautiful play between the new and the old that you can contrast against each other.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your questions answered, and contribute to the community dialogue. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our weekly Passive House Accelerator live webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from Melbourne, Australia, and I'm joined this week by Zach Semke. How you doing, Zach?
I am well in beautiful Seattle, Washington, where my kids are all on summer vacation beginning today.
Nice. And Mary, welcome back again. We've got Mary James. How are you?
I'm great. It's also gorgeous here in California.
Well, I'm a little bit rugged up in the lobby of or the entranceway of a hotel. It's not very warm in Melbourne, around about 6 or 7 degrees Celsius. But it's a little bit ironic because I am actually staying in a Passive House hotel, but the part that I'm sitting in right now is not part of the Passive House thermal envelope. But it's a very awesome experience to have the opportunity to stay in a certified Passive House here in Melbourne while attending the Thrive Passive House conference here, which had day one yesterday, and just sneaking in this quick recording before we head into day two. So yeah, very cool to be here.
That's amazing.
Oh, it's exciting that you're there.
It is exciting, and there's some cool stuff, and I'm having a couple of really good conversations with Mark here, so hopefully bring some interviews from my time here. But I guess as a brief prelude to some of that, there's a lot of discussion about natural materials, using Passive House as a basis for healthier living. Some conversations about communication, how we talk about Passive House, and then of course a Passive House in warmer climates and warmer humid climates, which is something we're going to talk a little bit about today as well. So all very topical, really good. And yeah, keen to get into this week's episode, which is something a little bit different. But before we do that, we've got a few people to thank, Zach.
We do indeed. So our sponsor of the week this week is LG Air Conditioning Technologies. So thank you to LG for making all of our programming possible here at Passive House Accelerator, including the Passive House podcast. I also want to thank our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Ingui Architecture, Partel, Rockwell North America, and Solo Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Boizo, Cascadia Windows and Doors, European Architectural Supply, Facro, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, LG Air Conditioning Technologies, and Source 2050.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've got a great conversation this week with Kristina Held of Held Architecture, and she does a pretty good job of introducing herself and talking to you, Mary, and also Ilka. Pretty amazing backstory for Kristina. So let's jump right in.
Welcome to the Passive House podcast. I'm Mary James, and I'm here with co-host Ilka Cassidy. And today we're speaking with Kristina Held, principal and founder of Held Architecture. Welcome, Kristina.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a delight.
And you've had very interesting educational history because you've studied architecture in 3 different countries, I understand. So could you tell us a little bit about where you were and just a little bit about how the architecture education differed in your different settings And then if you can work in also how you got involved in Passive House, that would be great.
Absolutely, that actually ties in really nicely. So we lived in, that was then called Serbia and Montenegro. Now there are two separate countries, Serbia and Montenegro. But I studied architecture in Belgrade, Serbia. And right from the beginning, colleges are different there because you have an immatriculation exam. So for architecture, that means that you have 1 day of freehand drawing, and that lasts about 4 hours. And in our case, they set us into the hallway of our classical building, which housed the architecture school, structural engineering, and electric engineering. And you basically draw the interior of that space, which is an interior atrium space. It's pretty complicated, stairs going up and old columns and all of that. So you draw that for 4 hours. And then the next day you have an exam in spatial thinking and math. And and then that along with your high school grades determines if you get accepted or not. That was the only architecture school in the country, so it was very competitive. So I actually didn't know if I was going to get accepted. So at the same time, I did the entrance exam for chemistry as well, which worked well. I got accepted there too. So then after 4 years there studying in Belgrade, so there is studio, of course, but there's also a lot of technical classes, which is very different than the other two schools in Germany and in the United States. So every year you actually have a different type of construction set that you have to prepare in addition to studio. Not to get too much and talk too much about it, but it might be interesting for students of architecture and architects in general. So you learn really all of the wood construction, steel construction, concrete. So it was basically an architecture architecture school combined with structural engineering, you could say that. So very detailed and also in engineering. And then went to Germany, and there the engineering wasn't that heavy, although the degree there was architectural engineering degree you get from Germany there. It's a 5-year program as well. And you have studio, you have not as much urbanism. In Belgrade, also what's specific is that they don't have a school separate for urbanists. So when you get the degree, you're actually an urbanist and an architect. So that's very specific for that school. In Germany, it's divided. You have a school for urbanists and a school for architects. So in Germany, very, very detailed, but not as in Belgrade, you learn a little bit from everything and then you apply it. Here, you learn specific what is applicable to your project. So what you have designed, you now have to understand how this is getting built up to a very big detail, like 5:1. So that's the difference. And a little bit less classes a year than in Belgrade. And then at UNCC, even less engineering. So really none at all, almost. Very, very abstract view of architecture, very much focused on conceptual design, thinking, more philosophy oriented. So there I also drifted to architectural theory. And that was actually my master thesis there was in architectural theory, with nothing to do with designing or with engineering, which I really loved doing. I really enjoyed that. And how that relates to Passive House is that both in Europe, both in Belgrade and in Kazachstan, there was a lot of engineering, and we actually detailed our projects the way it is done for Passive House projects. And coming to North Carolina, the climate is much milder. There is no continuous insulation. There is no insulation under the slab. Very, very simple, like a single layer construction. And I was so surprised when I got confronted with that. And then after a couple of years, I saw, oh, they have Passive House in the United States. How wonderful. And then I went to the first conference in Philadelphia and completely fell in love, because I met a lot of like-minded people who detailed the buildings just like I thought they should be, and didn't have to argue with anyone or prove why that was necessary. And I thought this is great. So then I got certified in Passive House, and since then I'm advocating for it. I use the principles on everything we design, and we have so far pre-certified a lot of single-family houses in the Carolinas. And we worked, you know, sometimes it does not work out because the clients don't move forward with it. But I think so far we worked on 8 to 10 homes in North Carolina and some in South Carolina, which is really a lot considering that there was none looking back 10 years ago in the Carolinas.
Well, thank you for the very detailed history of your education. I find it very interesting because I also went to school in Germany, right? And I actually did have a very different experience than
Did you?
you did. Yeah, I think it really depends on which school you go to. I
Okay,
went
really?
to a very technical school,
Mhm.
and so it sounds like a little bit more like your experience in Belgrade, where we really went through every year, went through a different construction type and really learned how to detail
Yes,
around
that's
windows
awesome.
and
Yeah, yes, that's what
all
we
of
did.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also combined with a lot of very conceptual design work as well.
Yes.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's really nice to just kind of get an overview how other schools and other countries approach architecture, because I feel like architecture is one of those professions where people have a very, very specific view and think it's one way, but it can be so many different ways. And really, the education and the profession is so different, varies so much. And yeah, I just interesting.
Yes.
And then,
Sorry.
yeah.
I'll just add that I think when I speak to clients, there's
Mm.
like two camps. One camp thinks that architects just draw pretty pictures, and then the other camp thinks we do permitting and construction. It's actually both. I would like to tell people it is the harmony of both.
Well, it's a lot of coordination work,
Yes, that too. Yeah.
right? And hand holding and managing. And to be honest, there should be a little bit of a psychology degree or therapist
especially
degree in
for
there.
single family homes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, it's great that you then slid right into the passive house world, which I think that's very similar to what I did too. I recognized all the very specific detailing that we learned in Germany, and I somehow heard about Passive House back then, and I was so happy when I found the Passive House Institute here in the US as well. And you were actually one of the first ones certified in North Carolina, is that correct?
I'm not sure about North Carolina, but in the Charlotte area,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Perfect. So do you mostly work on single family homes, or do you do other work as well?
For certification, currently, yes. The interest is very strong in single family homes, custom single family homes. But we also did an office building for a German company that was very interesting in sustainability, and also biophilia and passive house. So we detailed that building and used passive solar strategies for it, but they did not want to go for certification at all. They just didn't want the plaque. And then we are consulting for Cabarrus Community College. All their campus standards are basically based on passive house design, which is great. And now all the new buildings they are building, they want to do the WUFI modeling, and they want to just optimize the mechanical systems with envelope and design. So that is wonderful too. And then we have a multifamily project going on in Salem, Oregon, the Cannery. And there it's the same thing. We have geothermal. Oregon actually requires by code to have an ERV built into whatever you do, so that's great. And their code is so close already to passive house for that climate that I don't know if we are going to go for certification, but we are definitely designing with that in mind, which is nice.
And that's so interesting that you're working in Salem, Oregon. How did that happen? And then also I just want to talk about, you mentioned that the climate is more mild in North Carolina, but in some ways you have other challenges. Yes, it's maybe more mild on a temperature basis, but there's all that humidity. So maybe you can answer my first question first about how did you end up working in Oregon?
I met Trent Michaels, who worked for a big developer here in the Charlotte area, And he pulled me in to work on a wellness center, which was supposed to be a living building challenge certified building. So I designed this for him, and we worked maybe a year together and kept talking. And he's very interested in passive house living building challenge, building sustainable communities, as am I. And he is from Salem, Oregon. So he found this opportunity, and he is the visionary for this project, and I helped him move that along. So that's how that came. He lives in Charlotte, so that's how I got to Salem. He's from Salem, but lives in Charlotte, so that's the connection. And then your other question was about the climate in the Carolinas is very difficult because of the humidity. That is very true. And also, our winters aren't that mild anymore. I mean, we get into the -Celsius degrees here as well. We had probably a week where we had like -6, -7 Celsius, and I'm still in Celsius. I apologize. I cannot do the Fahrenheit yet. After so many years, I can't do it. Doesn't tell me anything. I don't know how to dress if you tell me how many Fahrenheit it is outside. So it has to be well insulated because our winters are harsh. And yeah, you have to deal with the humidity definitely coming from the outside, and then you can never be too vapor tight, because that's really dangerous here. Then in the winter, as you cook and shower, you have a lot of vapor coming from the inside. It wants to escape. You can't keep that inside. So yes, a very big concern on ventilating properly, having the correct vapor openness on membranes to prevent any mold growth and unhealthy indoor air quality, for sure.
And you mentioned that you have like 10 projects pre-certified or certified. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Like in general, is there a lot of knowledge about Passive House in North Carolina?
I think we have much less. We have, I think, 5 that are actually pre-certified. And then one of them is completed. The other one just reached certification. I think we'll get the plaque in 3 days, which is very, very exciting.
Congratulations.
And
that one is the name of that one is that the Neville's Creek one?
The Neville's Creek one still is not there, but the Zivitsky residence is. So that's in Davidson. That's a 5,700 square foot 2-story home on beautiful land, 11 acres in Davidson, and it will be the first one in Davidson that would be Passive House certified. And then we have a third one that's built in Charlotte, and that's a single family residence that's very modern. And that's also over 5,000 square feet, and that's being in construction. That one is pre-certified as well. And yeah, so the interest there is from people who some are interested in building science, some have allergies, and they really need a healthy environment to raise their kids in and for themselves. We have clients like that as well. But mostly it's people who really see the benefit in having a well-built house, and they also would like to save on energy, and they are a little bit geeks in terms of technology and building science, I have to say. But all the houses we did also really wouldn't say it's a passive house, because clients come to us and they all have their own vision of where they want to live. And I think that is great, because they are, that it's their home. So we have anything from very abstract modern to traditional Victorian arts and crafts, farmhouse, contemporary. We have like all sorts of styles, and like everyone is different. Yeah.
Yeah, before we get into more details of one of those projects, can you talk a little bit about your adaptive reuse project as well? Because that's kind of a sustainability approach as well, right? Rather than rebuilding something new, you're reusing what's already there. How do you go about that?
I think that comes from the client. If they buy a building that is, affordable, they like the location, and then they come to us and say, well, we would like to revamp that and either make different use of it or keep the use but modernize it in terms of all the systems and also architecture. I think it's challenging, but I really love those projects, because the bones of the existing building really informs your new work. And it's a really beautiful play between the new and the old that you can contrast against each other. And maybe you are talking about an existing office building, 2-story, that we did in Uptown Charlotte. And that was actually a law office, and it's still a law office. It's a law office that was built in the 80s, and it had no daylight at all, very small windows on the exterior, and all the corridors were rated. So there was no glass at all. It was just really dark and only 3-foot wide corridors. So we approached it from the fact that this building needs daylight. Like that was the first thing you saw when you came in. And did a lot of code research and found out that those walls actually don't need to be rated at all, which was wonderful. We could widen the corridor and make glass partitions towards the corridor, which let the exterior light penetrate into the depth of the building. And it looks like a Class A high-end law office when you come in. We also, towards the street, we opened the windows, made bigger openings on it, and then also gave it the fresh look with an attached facade. And where we changed the facade, we did go with continuous insulation on the exterior. So we did that, but we couldn't do it, unfortunately, all around. But yeah, adaptive reuse is a great way, and you can help any old building become something new and make it a really good project.
Yeah.
I'd love to go back for a minute to sort of the weather-related challenges in your area and how you address them. And I thought Neville's Creek, your project, is one great example, but if there's another one you want to talk about, that's fine. Also, just kind of how you adapt Passive House, like what concerns might come up for you adapting Passive House to your climate, how you have to tweak your assemblies maybe to deal with the humidity that you were talking about before.
Yeah, Neville's Creek is, I think orientation for Neville's Creek and any other passive house we do is really important. Sometimes you can't do it, but we were lucky, so we were always able to have a single family home on a piece of property that's pretty large. So you are free to orient it the best way, which means the long axis is oriented west-east. So you get on the long side of the building, you get the most sunlight during the day. And this comes also, you can see that all over North Carolina in vernacular architecture, the deep porch, so deep southern porch, very nice feature. And we did that even in the office building in Huntersville. So it's just really nice because it prevents direct heat gain through the glass on the south, but it still gives you that warmth all throughout the day. And in the winter, you can have the winter sun angles come into the building and warm it up, which is really nice. So I think the orientation is the first thing we would start, and really big use of the traditional southern porch, just readaptive and, looks different, but it's the same concept. We try to minimize openings on the west specifically. For our climate, that's the harshest sun in the summer. It gets extremely hot and can add a lot of heat gain. But generally, our passive homes usually have a lot of great views because usually sit on like 30 acres of land, and you don't want small windows. You really want to be part of nature. The assemblies are very similar as you would do them anywhere else, except we cannot afford to put an interior vapor barrier in our assembly. That's very specific for the South. So you should never do that, like no wallpaper, nothing. It's usually just paint. So our air and vapor barrier usually wants to be on the exterior, and just one. You don't want to double that up at all. And what works really nice is a rain screen. That way you have your weather barrier, and if water gets into that first layer, it gives a way to dry out and get out. I think that works pretty well. Yeah. And also what we do from the mechanical point, we usually add a dehumidifier into the system. The ARV does some of the dehumidification, but it's good to add the dehumidifier in there just in case, and it does a little bit of the work as well.
So are you using exterior insulation as well? And is it vapor open or vapor closed?
We use we experimented with different assemblies. So for the Neville's Creek house, we used only mineral wool, and we used a Mento exterior weather barrier. And then on the inside, we actually did use an Intello. And then towards the interior, starting from the Intello, we had an electrical chase. So that way, you basically built 3 walls and mineral wool bats in the 2x6 frame that held up the structure. And because mineral wool is very porous, so that works actually really well. And then for, let's say, for the Zivitsky home, we used armor wall. And we used it because the contractors had some trouble with the lead system on top of the mineral wool, and they didn't know how to attach and wanted to go back all the way to the sheeting and then puncture through all of the membranes, which we didn't like. So with the armor wall, it's like an R-rated zip, just with the gypsum board product. It comes with a liquid air barrier. And that way they can attach whatever they have directly on it, and it makes it much easier for them. And this came with an EPS, rigid insulation, and the whole board with the sheeting that's 1/2 inch was like almost 4 inches. So it's pretty extensive. And then we filled the walls with bats. And we did not use an interior Intello in that case. We just left it as the exterior to not make it too closed. That works very well too. And then use the same armor wall for the house that's being built in Charlotte as well. And then other homes we did with Zip R. And then we also used the Be Public panels as well for a house. So those have also 2 membranes, but they have blown in cellulose in between. So that would work well for a climate too.
Right. Yeah, I think the most important thing for your climate, I mean, it doesn't sound like it's that different from even my climate here, but just being a little bit more careful about like trapping moisture, like whatever is vapor open probably works the best because you can dry out to both
Yes.
sides.
Yes, exactly.
And is there are there any specific considerations regarding the HVAC system and ventilation? You know, you mentioned that you definitely have to have dehumidification. So how do you tie all of that in? And yeah.
Well, how we worked it before is actually, I think, very, very classic that you probably also do in your climate for houses. So we have usually a heat pump, a ducted heat pump unit. And that is completely separate from the ERV unit. So that is ducted separately. So those 2 systems can function independently depending on what temperature the thermostat tells it to be. And in addition to that, we have the dehumidifier. And we usually have a mechanical engineer that helps us out, because on the first building we did on the Neville's Creek project, we had, I think we had like 3/4 of a ton or even just 1/2 a ton of heat pump that we needed. That's all we needed. But they did not want to install it because they said it's too low. Like they couldn't guarantee it. And they wanted to install, I don't know, 4 or something like that. I said, that's way too much. So the way around it was to get the mechanical engineer who we work on commercial projects with, and they do a manual J and they do a load calculation, and they actually produce stamp drawings, and then the installers will install the lower tonnage. So that's one way how we found to work around it, but the buildings work very well. The clients are really happy in them. So
yeah, I mean, that's also very, I think that's across all climates, a similar issue where you have such small loads that you can get away with really small equipment. But the problem is that sometimes that equipment is not meant to heat a whole house, but only a room, right? So the reach of the, the conditioned air sometimes is not far enough. So the fan power a lot of times has to be increased just to get the conditioned air where it needs to go, right? And most of the time the engineer is a little bit more willing to play with that, and all those per room load calculations help a lot because that's something that Woofy doesn't do.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
What we did in the Zivitsky, which worked out well, due to having structural in there, which we couldn't penetrate, but there is a units in each wing of the house. So you do it with 2 split, and then you can do the east and west side independently, which is nice too.
Well, that's interesting. An interesting discussion too. How do you split those, right? Because sometimes it works east-west, but sometimes it works better, like if you have 2 or 3 floors,
Yeah.
because of the difference in temperatures. Like I had a project where I think we divided it east-west, but we should have done basement and then first and second floor, because at the shoulder seasons, you might actually have to run heating and cooling at the same time, at least in our climate. And if you split it, east west or south, I guess east west, you can't really, do that. So it's just interesting, like all different considerations there.
Here it works sort of well because the west gets so hot in the summer, so you can maybe work with that. But it worked also because, like I said, the design of the house, it worked really well to get the ductwork where it needed to be. So.
Yeah, great.
And was it hard to find an MEP engineer who was comfortable working with your constraint?
Well, we work with a pretty big engineering firm, TLC Engineering, and they are really good at helping us out with this. But in general, yes, it is really hard to find a good engineer, especially here. It's also hard to find good fuse raters as well. So I think because we don't have that many passive homes here, and then they're still catching up.
How about builders?
We have several builders who are certified and very interested in passive house, and they have done green building before, or like, how do they say, the good enough house. So we have several there, but it's still a learning curve for them. But the nice thing is that they're all very, very into it, very interested, and want to make it work. And I think that's the most what's needed, that they understand it and want to make it work.
And are your single family homes, are your owners concerned about fire resistance of the structures, or like flooding, since you guys had that huge storm last year?
We have not worked with, well, the Neville's Creek is sort of close to a body of water, but it's not in a flood zone. We do have high winds there. And one of the concerns with fire is when you have solar panels and then the battery packs. So we always put them in conditioned space. And at the Neville's Creek, it's paired up with the heat pump water heater, which extracts heat from the room, which is a nice combination. So the batteries generate heat, the hot water heater uses it to heat the water. So that's good. But that particular battery room storage, we did a 2-hour rated partition around it because the client was really worried with the batteries that something might happen. So that was one. Other than that, we didn't have any concerns with specifically fire rating.
So you actually have a very beautiful little video about the the Neville's Creek passive house, right? And I think what struck me is how involved the client seems to be. So how was that working with him? Did he bring already a lot of knowledge to the table, or just interest? Or how did that work?
He brought both knowledge and interest to the table. So he brought his vision, how it was supposed to look like. He really liked old tobacco farms, and he knew what the programming, how many bedrooms he wanted, that he doesn't want a big kitchen, things like that, that he wanted to live on the 7th floor. And then we did the design for him and did the passive house design. But he is a yacht builder, so he is a builder by profession. And also he designs the boats as well. So what he did in his house that's so interesting is he had the electrician who wires all the yachts for him. He actually wired this house. So the electrical panel for this house is one that you would see on a boat, and not at all a typical residential electrical panel, which is very specific. And also he used a lot of DC throughout the house. so he can use direct current without converting to AC and then back to DC again. So he has all the lights, I think, at DCs, the fans, and some appliances as well. So that saves a lot of power. But he really enjoys it. He likes the even temperature in the house, the good air quality, and he just enjoys the view. It's like sitting in a tree house. Everywhere you look is green. So it's really pretty. Yeah, but definitely he was interested in the technology part of the house a lot. Yeah. Mhm.
It's very exciting that he was able to, with his experience, do direct current DC wiring for some of his appliances, because I worked on a report ages ago, probably 20 years ago, about the efficiency advantages of not converting from DC to AC and back again. But on a realistic basis, it's hard to find projects where people are interested in doing, because it makes everything, it's not business as usual, so it makes everything a little bit more complicated to implement that.
Yeah, but they did it, and they did that all by themselves. So we did have nothing to do with it. They just were able to get all of the electrification done themselves. So that was pretty exciting. We worked on a research project for DC. So they were looking to do a passive house because they are so energy efficient. And then basically balancing that out with DC. And through that, I learned that actually a lot of appliance manufacturers like LG, they work on DC appliances. They are prototypes. You can't buy them. But I thought that was interesting. That might be coming, and maybe it's just testing the waters and nothing may come of it. But people are thinking about it for sure.
Well, it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I mean, then all your computers are also
Yes.
DC, and so there's a lot of efficiencies if, with a little more marketplace acceptance. So
Yeah, you lose probably between 15 and 20% of electricity by this constant conversion back and forth. So that's quite a lot.
yeah. And Ilka mentioned the video of Neville's Creek, and it's really beautiful. I encourage people listening to the podcast to go and look at it. That tobacco barn's shape and the external corridor is really beautiful.
Yes, it is. And yeah, I just wanted to add that there's quite a bit to learn from other industries, right? It just seems like the building industry is always just so stuck in, its own bubble, but just, yeah, boat building, there's a lot to learn. I mean, even in terms of condensation and air tightness, water tightness, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, this client just reminded me of my father, he's an engineer and always had boats and sailed and always built on them. And now he's retired and he just takes that knowledge and builds stuff on his house. And it's always different than whatever everyone else is building, but it always works. Very efficient and very smart.
Yes, I think people who have the desire to build, they will find a way to build something. Doesn't matter what it is, yacht, a tree house, or just a piece of furniture. It's just they enjoy the craft of creation. I think that's nice.
Absolutely. Well,
it's really, I mean, I just have to say, you're making it sound so easy to have all these clients in North Carolina who are interested in Passive House, but you are unique in that it's, you're one of the first in your area to do that. And I just wondered, as we wrap up, what are the primary selling points typically for your clients? I mean, is it efficiency when you talk about Passive House, or is it comfort? Or you mentioned allergies. Are there other reasons why you've been able to establish this practice in North Carolina where you focus on Passive House?
That is a great question. I don't know either how they find me. They find me mostly through the FIUS list because there are so few in North Carolina and in our area. And then you find me as a certified passive house consultant. But A couple of times it was that people wanted to combine their aesthetic vision with passive house, and they called other places and they were told, no, you cannot have a Victorian house and have it passive house, like that's impossible. And then the client called me and I said, why not? Of course we can do that. Or they have some technical question and I'm able to answer that over the phone. So usually the first conversation is very informative for them, whatever that may be about site selection. I just give them a lot of information just because, I have it, why not? So I think they do appreciate that. And yeah, and people are really concerned with health these days. And we get a lot of clients that have young families and they want to raise them in a very healthy environment. That's definitely the case for the Zivitskis in Davidson. That house definitely came from that she wanted a really no toxin environment, connected to nature, and it's a very healthy, holistic way of approaching life, raising children and living.
Great. Well, that's a great note to wrap up on. Really appreciate your time and coming to speak with us.
And that was Kristina Held of Held Architecture, originally from Serbia, studying in Belgrade. Pretty amazing story there, and obviously interesting interaction with Ilka and their different experiences, also learning in architecture in Germany as well. And then, of course, doing her practice now. So lots of experience. And for me, I was particularly interested in more recent experience dealing with warmer climates and humidity, which Mary, I think you picked up on a little bit. It's definitely a topic in my part of the world, and how people deal with that, particularly with more vapor open assemblies, which is quite interesting. What were your takeaways, Mary?
Yes, I mean, one of the aspects that I really appreciate was how blasé almost she was about the challenges of dealing with the humidity of the Southeast here in the United States and the high temperatures and cold winters still where she is. So it's great. It's great to be at a point in Passive House where these kind of climate variations are, not that big a deal anymore because there's a lot of experience to draw from.
Absolutely. Zach, what about you?
Yeah, well, it's beautiful work and on these gorgeous big sites in the wilderness and in nature. I think part of a pattern that we see in a lot of places around the adoption of Passive House in new markets. So for advocates of building decarbonization, I think you hear things at like a 5,000 square foot single family house, and you recognize that that's not necessarily the most sustainable move that we can be making in our buildings. There's a lot of embodied carbon involved in that, and it's on a green field, so there are environmental impacts there. That said, we see over and over these kind of fancy single-family passive houses being at the vanguard of the adoption of Passive House in new markets that then develops into the next wave, which are affordable housing projects, multifamily affordable housing projects. We certainly saw that in the Pacific Northwest. When I was first introduced to Passive House 15 years ago, the first projects were happening were beautiful single-family houses, often on green fields, for wealthy clients, many of whom were, of the kind of technical, geeky nature, who were really drawn to the excellence of these buildings. And lo and behold, these, in the Pacific Northwest now, we're seeing many units of Passive House, affordable housing being created. So I think that it's important to acknowledge, the realities of that footprint of a single family house at large, but also recognize that there are these projects can help leverage a transformation in building practice that ultimately is a really important sustainable step.
Yeah, and I think, like I say, we've seen that trend. I know here in in New Zealand, and well, here in Australia as well, where the early adopters were often people who perhaps have a bigger budget for an individual house, but now, 10 years on in the passive house adoption in this part of the world, we're seeing community houses, schools, and some small commercial buildings, and even talking about social housing and affordable housing. And that will happen as the industry grows, as expertise in the region grow, and as the market develops. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's got to start somewhere. I think it's an important thing to acknowledge, but it's also important to not to associate that size and that budget as being passive house. And that's a conversation that's come up here in the conference that I'm attending, but also in previous conferences that I've talked about here, where people have mentioned the cost of building is largely due to the cost of building, not the cost of doing the sustainability bits, whether that's passive house or any other form of energy efficiency or sustainability. It's just the cost of building is the expensive bit. So I think it's important that, I guess there's a danger that, you see those really large sort of luxury homes, and this potentially strengthens that association with passive house cost. So it's probably something that we just need to be wary of.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, let's remember that the data from Massachusetts Clean Energy Center looking at affordable housing projects in Massachusetts and comparing the passive house ones to the conventional ones there, and seeing a cost incremental upfront cost delta of like 2% or 3%, which is easily paid back just financially, not to mention over time with the utility bills, but not to mention all of the health benefits that for filtered fresh air delivery, which is a big piece of that cost, brings. So affordable. There are so many examples of affordable passive house projects to serve as counterpoints to these bigger ones.
Yeah. A couple of other things for me. I mentioned the vapor open assembly. Also really interesting talking about the various systems. So ERV with a separate heat pump and also a dehumidifier, which sounds quite complex, but I guess that's quite necessary for dealing with that level of humidity. And Mary, I'm really pleased that you picked up on the DC circuits. Is that something that you've heard of elsewhere?
Yes, as I said a while back, I edited a report on looking at the efficiencies if you just use DC appliances as much as you can, because and I was surprised to find out then that so many of our appliances, and certainly all of our computers and everything, they all operate on DC, but they have converters to convert AC to DC. And if you're generating renewable energy, that's output in DC, so and which then gets converted to AC. So it's just a lot of waste of energy to do those double conversions. And so I thought it was really exciting. I don't think I've heard of an actual home where it's doing this very much, although I think some people do it for lighting systems, like the Lumicache, I believe, can operate directly on DC.
I've heard of a few sort of DIY enthusiasts who have set up their own systems, particularly if they've got solar panels and then maybe a battery, because then, like you say, if the battery will produce direct current, and you can power low and particularly LED lights. It's perfect because you don't need a huge amount of power, and it's a much more efficient way of I mean, as you say, anything that we plug in and use today, which has a converter, which is most of our devices, all our laptops, our phones, they all have this box somewhere that's converting AC from that's coming out of the wall socket into DC current. So if you can just keep it as DC, it's a lot more efficient. I mean, there are some other technical issues around that, but I think it's an interesting history quirk that we've rely more on AC than we do on DC.
And I thought it was interesting that, speaking of generating DC, that she put the batteries inside the conditioned space, because that's not something I've heard of very often. And
No, so that was a fire resilience
right.
feature, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so some really good stuff there. Always really keen on hearing people's stories and how they got to be doing what they're doing. So yeah, thank you for bringing us that conversation, Mary. I think there's always really some good stuff to learn. And you can check out Kristina's work at Held Architecture. So keen to do that. And what else have we got coming up, Zach?
Yeah, well, we are nearing the end of our season of Passive House Accelerator Lives because we take July and August off for Passive House Accelerator Live during the summer. So we are finishing up this season with the inimitable Ed May of Building Type, who will be presenting for the next level, or sorry, the next up edition of Passive House Accelerator Live. He'll be talking about resilience modeling in energy modeling. And touching on the latest and greatest around that practice. So encourage people to join us for that. And then if you are hankering to stay involved in the world of high performance building and design during the summer, I encourage you to check out the Reimagine Buildings Collective. We are launching a Reimagine Summer Lab. And each of these are small cohorts of groups of peers who will tackle one real world challenge in healthy climate forward building in kind of a lightweight way. So we'll be meeting just a couple of times with your cohort throughout the summer, reflecting, sharing lessons, and sharing kind of findings from the conversations around those. So we're organizing those to begin in early July, and we'd love to see folks join us for those. They're going to be a lot of fun.
Nice. Lots going on. Despite going on summer holidays, there will be something to tune into, listen to, and we'll of course be back with another episode as well. Podcast will carry on through, and I'm going to be heading off today to day 2 of the Australian Passive House Conference Thrive here in Melbourne. Catching up with a bunch of people there and hoping to catch up with a few speakers for some more content as well. So I'll be signing off here, but hoping to be back soon. And we will be back again with another episode next week.